How's it going, guys? Jace here, and today is going to kick off a nice string of videos for me talking about Granblue versus in the current beta build. And obviously keep in mind things are subject to change, but with the beta build we have currently played so far, we're going to be going over what we have available to us, and I'll be talking about the mechanics that were available and also the characters. So let's get started with the controls. In the game, I believe for pad players, the controls that they give you to default is perfectly fine. So unless you want to make any custom control changes, if you're just hopping to the game, you're not sure, I believe the default is pretty good for you guys. But I was using stick, and I decided to change my buttons. So what I was using was a 6-button layout. Currently on the top was light attack, medium attack, heavy, and then on the bottom row was unique, guard, and the skills. So for the skills moves, I wasn't really using it for shortcuts for special moves, but I was using it for supers when I was doing one-hit confirms, because if you use the skills button for supers, you do cut down one extra input. So it's nice for one-hit confirms to get that, to cut down an extra input, which is pretty useful. Moving over to the movement, I think the immediate thing I was surprised about was the fact that when you run, there is recovery. So you cannot immediately block after you run, unlike something like Guilty Gear or maybe some other anime games like Gbvs. And you can't do anything to stop your momentum, so you have to recover while you're running. So it made it, in spaces where it's really up close, it made it dangerous to run at somebody because you were pretty much vulnerable. You could take a risk and use one of the two options that were given to you from the guard button, which were evade and I believe the dodge. So out of run you can use the evade and dodge, but obviously those have a risk. They're pretty low recovery wise, but it's still, the risk is there. So it made run not as safe as you would expect in other anime games. Jumping wise, you can air block except for DPs. I believe some DPs, especially the EX ones, were air unblockable, which is fair. But normal wise and fireballs and other special attacks, you were able to block in the air. Currently there's only two types of jumps. There was just, I believe, super jump and normal jump, which was nice depending on the character you were playing. You were able to close the distance. I believe with Gran it was pretty good because his jump attacks were quite strong. So against characters like Fairy and Catalina, where it was hard to close the distance with his normals, mixing in between neutral jumping, normal jumping, and super jumps was pretty useful to get in. Moving on to, I would say, offense-wise, it's pretty interesting that currently for defense-wise, there is an instant block, but I believe it does not reduce frame data. Some people have said it is, but I've confirmed with some people that have tested the game quite a lot and said that there isn't any sort of frame data changes when you instant block. It only helps you build a bar, extra bar for your super, which is interesting. So I know for Gran, his crushing light attack, his standing medium attack, and I believe there's one other normal he has that was plus. I can't exactly remember. I believe it was, oh, excuse me, his close medium attack and his close light attack were plus, and his crouching light attack. So I actually should mention that right now, is that there is different types of normals depending on if you're close or far. So if you're far, you cannot string together normals. This is not dial a combo. But if you're up close, your close normals have auto combos attached to them. So both, I mean all three, light, medium, heavy, have auto combos. So if you're up close and press heavy and you mash heavy, it will go into the same auto combo that your character has. So that's kind of how you get nice damage and how do you build offense. Because I'm pretty sure other characters besides Gran had normals up close that were plus, that helped them build some good offense. And the fact that instant blocking does not change frame data. Gran was pretty strong up close. Obviously I'll talk about more about Gran in depth in my later video, letting you guys know how strong I felt he was and other stuff like that. Also another big thing in the offense game was the throws. So there's two types of throws. Well, I guess there's two types of ways to tech throw. One of them was the normal tech, which is obviously you both get pushed back pretty far. But there was also late teching, So I believe in the game you have a 10 frame window to normal tech, and you have a 4 frame window for the late tech. So the penalty for late teching is you are more negative and you take a little bit of damage. In the character animations, you can easily tell if you late teched or not, because your character will kind of fall to the ground and struggle to get back up. Whereas in a normal tech, kind of like any standard fighting game, you'll both bounce off each other and it seems like you're both back in neutral pretty evenly. But the throw game is pretty interesting because there is an aspect of shimmying in the game. So especially in the corner, I like to use Grant as an example since I had the most time with him, but you can obviously, if you say you get a throw on him or you get some sort of knockdown on your opponents, you can kind of walk up to them and walk back and cause a shimmy situation. And with Grant in the corner, especially using his EX moves, he has a lot of high damage. So the throw game is kind of scary. And the fact that throws do a decent amount of damage is also a pretty big deal. Going back to defense-wise, besides the instant blocking, both the dodge and evade were also pretty decent. Sometimes people use it on wake up, which is kind of interesting, because they both have relatively low recovery. So it's not a bad idea to use it. Sometimes they are not thrownable. So if you evade or roll out of the corner or something like that, you are susceptible to being thrown again. But any sort of physical attacks, supers, fireballs, you are immune against for that small period of time. Also, an uninteresting thing was people were also complaining about how the normals worked for anti-airs. So depending on the character you're using, some characters have decent anti-air normals. Grand's was down H, and it was a little weird. Sometimes it would not anti-air as well as I think it would. So I would go back to DP more often because of the invincibility frames. So I wonder if they're going to buff that or not. But I know a lot of people are complaining about a lot of the characters were not very strong anti-air wise with their normals. Especially for Catalina, where she had a lot of different options to anti-air, but you know, it made it also kind of difficult for somebody who, you know, we only had 3 days with the game. Barely. We technically only had 15 hours with the game. So trying to figure out what angles to anti-air and stuff like that was definitely difficult to use. But I think I'm going to reel back into the offense section actually. So a good thing to mention is a lot of the moves in the game are quite unsafe. So that also might be the reason why they did not go for instant blocking to change frame data. So for example, Grand's Rekka attack is pretty unsafe in every range. Depending on the range, you can make it a little more safer than others, but majority of the time you are able to punish with any sort of normal, usually like a light or a medium attack. Same with Catalina, her spear, I believe it was like 214 L or M. Both of them were pretty unsafe. So I can see what they're going for, that they don't want to make too many moves where the neutral is, you know, more degenerate. They want to kind of reel that back, so you kind of have to play a pretty safe neutral game. Even a lot of the normals, like a lot of the heavy attacks, if you were just did heavy attack into nothing, you're pretty susceptible to getting punished, I found out. So usually I'm pretty sure all the characters had some sort of special move that they can go into to keep themselves safe, but not plus. There wasn't really any special moves that were plus on block, besides maybe some EX moves. I believe Catalina and Grant's fireballs were plus. I know Grant for a fact, but I'm pretty sure Catalina's was too, because they were multiple hits. But yeah, the game has interesting stuff. I think the real appeal of it is the fact that it's honestly pretty fair, which is something to be not taken for granted, especially how fighting games are now. So, you know, if you're looking for a pretty fair, neutral-based fighting game, this might be the game for you. I'll talk more in depth about how I feel, what is the true appeal of this game, but I kind of want to go over some things I thought about the mechanics. Character-wise, I think obviously people were saying Fairy was really strong. I also believe Grant and Catalina were also very, very strong, probably a little bit lower than her. Lancelot and Charlotta were good, but kind of weaker. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. In later videos, I'll talk about more in depth on other stuff, but I just wanted to give a brief overview of how I felt about the game. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time.